Hi, welcome to Bespoke Unit. I'm CP, and in this video I'm reviewing the Oliva Serie V Melanio Maduro. As with all our cigar reviews, we'll be using the Bespoke Unit Cigar Formula, a quantifiable review matrix that you can use at home. Just look in the description, you'll find a link that goes to a guide which teaches you how to use it, but also provides you with blank PDF versions for your own use. Similarly, these cigars have been stored using the Boveda acrylic humidor that you can see behind me. They were in there for a period of 3 weeks with 69% Boveda packs, which ensured that they were properly acclimated for the review, and we checked on them regularly using a Boveda butler. So far we've reviewed the original Serie V, the Serie V Maduro, the Serie V Melanio, and now we're reviewing the Serie V Melanio Maduro. You can see in the description below all the previous videos, and you'll see a couple of cards appearing above my head so you can check them out. The Oliva Serie V Melanio Maduro was once again named after Melanio Oliva, the forefather to the family, who was a tobacco grower in the 1880s in Cuba. He served in the Cuban War of Independence and was succeeded by his son Hipólito. Hipólito grew tobacco as well, and his son ended up being a tobacco broker rather than a grower. He travelled around neighbouring tobacco countries and eventually settled in Nicaragua, where he discovered soil that was very similar to the original soil from Cuba that he knew and loved. The Melanio Maduro was released in 2013, the following year of the original Melanio. It's produced at the Tabacalera Oliva de Nicaragua SA, also known as Tabolisa. In January 2020, Oliva completed Tabolisa 1, their new factory in which these cigars will surely be manufactured. The cigar I have in my hand is a 5x52 Robusto box press, but recently Oliva just released a limited edition Figurado version, which is also a box press and tapered at both ends like a Perfecto. This is 7 inches long and is said to be the quintessential expression of this particular blend. The Serie V Melanio Maduro features a Mexican San Andres wrapper, much like the original Oliva Serie V Maduro, instead of using the Ecuadorian Sumatra wrapper which can be found on the original Melanio version. It also consists of a Nicaraguan binder and filler which has been cultivated in the country's Jalapa Valley. We'll jump straight in by assessing the look and feel of the cigar, and I have an unsmoked Melanio Maduro here that I can use for this. It has probably the best construction of the whole Serie V line, including the Melanio ones, is perfectly even, there are no soft spots whatsoever, and has a nice firm spring. It has a distinctive coffee bean hue, but it doesn't have an oily sheen that was quite as alluring as perhaps the original Melanio. The veins are non-existent. In fact, it is a very smooth cigar and it doesn't at all, despite its dull appearance, have a rustic feel to it. The aromas are quite subtle on the nose, but I did detect some nutmeg, cacao, and cinnamon. There's a key difference between cocoa and cacao being the bean and cocoa being the powder that is used to produce a drink or even some chocolate. As for the Prelight of the cigar, I've heard that the Figurado is perhaps a little bit tight, but the Robusto is perfect, and it just offers you the right amount of resistance that you would want in a cigar. It is rich in flavour as well, and delivers chicory, which was quite an interesting note that I haven't detected on many cigars, as well as some birchwood and rooibos tea. Looking now at the overall palate of the cigar, I found that the first third was impressively complex, fragrant and full of flavours despite having a medium body. It delivers some fragrant rosewood which accords nicely with some syrupy molasses. This was quite reminiscent of boise, which is an ingredient occasionally used in rum or cognac, which gives it a mature woody flavour. This is an additive which is perfectly allowed in these drinks, but in small limited quantities. The overall result was surprisingly vinous, and there was a touch of black pepper on the retrohale. Descending into the second third, here I started to experience some pistachio nut, which was much like the original Serie V Melanio. However, this was accompanied by some charred bay leaf, which added an aromatic potential and went very nicely with another interesting note of toasted rugbrød, which is a Danish black bread. This was particularly toasty, yeasty, and very pleasant indeed. Once we found ourselves in the final third, here I started to detect a little bit of licorice, which was very dominant and appeared also in the retrohale. This was accompanied by some espresso beans, which were very overt, quite opulent, as well as some very balsamic and surprising argud. What's interesting about argud is that it seems to be a reoccurring theme in all of the Oliva V cigars. As I mentioned earlier, The Oliva Serie V Melanio Maduro is very complex and it has a velvety smooth mouthfeel. Its astringents and palate stimulation are very balanced and it gives you good stimulation throughout the whole tongue, far more than the Melanio, which tended to focus right in the center. Its life cycle is nicely developed and it does give you a story throughout each third. However, its body remains medium through the whole thing, and which is quite surprising for a Maduro, which you tend to expect to be very strong. Finally, the finish is very long in the final third, but much shorter in the first third. This gives you about 40 minutes of a good aftertaste that you can enjoy while you're finishing your drink. As for the residual scent in the room, it probably isn't as pleasant as the Melanio, which I found to be more fragrant. This tends to be more fuller-bodied and tends to linger for a little longer. Meanwhile, the burn is excellent. As you can see, I have a very good burn line here with a very razor-sharp burn line as well. The draw is consistent throughout the whole experience and the temperature remains nice and cool, probably cooler than the original Melanio. And the ash backbone, however, was a little bit weaker, but still very good. And as you can see, it has a beautiful white ash that just hangs in there. As for the overall experience of the cigar, as you can see, it consists of the same band as the original Serie V Melanio, except at the bottom, instead of having Gran Reserva Limitada, it has Maduro. As you can see with all the Serie V cigars, I'll just reach over and pick out here the Maduro of the original Serie V, we always have the same style of band, which can make it quite difficult to recognize them if they're not marked when you're doing some cigar shopping. However, there are some key differences. For example, on the Maduro of the original, you have Maduro Especial, and on the Melanios you do have a second band, but on the sides it also says Gran Reserva Limitada. Meanwhile, the box of the Melanio Maduro is almost identical to the box of the original Melanio. It is a nice wooden box with hinges and a cedar lining. The value of the cigar is excellent. It comes in as almost, in fact, probably the same price as the Melanio. I found the Robusto came in for a single at about $10.60. Paul bought a few boxes online and he got them on sale. I'm not sure of the exact price nor the retailer he got them at, but it came to around $8 a stick. As for the occasion of the cigar, like the original Melanio and the other Serie V, they're extremely versatile and can be taken to a variety of different occasions. You could enjoy it at a very luxurious location. You could also enjoy it among friends. A special event such as a wedding would be great as well. The Melanio Maduro is probably best suited to later in the day than the original Melanio. In fact, I would consider smoking it probably later in the evening, after dinner, maybe even at night time with a nightcap drink. Finally, we'll discuss the pairings of the cigar, and as you can see, this is an unscored element in the review formula. In fact, you can see the full finished review formula in the written review, which is in a link in the description. First of all, for food, like the entire Serie V line, I suggested cured ham throughout the whole thing, for something like Black Forest or prosciutto. These would go wonderfully with the cigar that is packed with gourmand and expressive aromatic flavors, as well as a couple of spices. Otherwise, you could go for some dark chocolate. I would suggest something by, for example, Argent Cove, which is a brand I really like that is based in Granada, Nicaragua. They produce some very artisanally, beautifully made creations, and a great one is the saffron chocolate, which has a nice spicy profile, and the spiciness would go perfectly with the cigar. And finally, with all the other Serie V cigars, I suggested things like pepperoni pizza and char-grilled meat. I thought would be an interesting change of pace for the Melanio Maduro would be perhaps ratatouille. Now bear with me, this sounds a little bit weird, but there's some bay leaf and thyme and aromatics that are used to properly cook a good ratatouille, and there is indeed some aromatic notes in the cigar. And a good ratatouille spends hours bubbling away and simmering, and if you have some quality ingredients such as quality aubergines and courgettes, it would be quite rich in flavour and bold, which would go quite nicely with this cigar. As for beverages, as I mentioned in the first third, there was this intriguing vinous boise note, this accord produced by the rosewood and the molasses. Indeed, it would be amiss to not go for perhaps a cognac with the cigar, especially a fine champagne cognac that's rich in those leathery and spicy notes, which would accord beautifully with this. Otherwise, you could consider a dark aged rum. I would probably lean towards a Diplomatico, which I believe does use boise and a couple of other naughty little additives, but that would go very nicely with the cigar, rather than using, for example, a Flor de Caña, which is much more natural and tends to have a more fragrant personality. And finally, if you're going to have coffee with this, I would definitely go for an espresso, particularly a nice and tight ristretto that's made with dark toasted beans. That would go wonderfully with the properties of this cigar. While I thoroughly enjoyed the original Serie V Maduro, this is an excellent experience. It wouldn't say it's better or above and beyond, but it may suit your own personal preferences. It's far more complex than even the original Melanio, and for someone like me who prefers mild to medium smokes, this is an interesting experience because the body is relatively low, it's quite balanced, but the flavors are incredibly nuanced and complex. If you're somebody who's even a beginner and you want to try a quality Maduro that gives you a more nuanced and subtle experience with some underlying notes, this would certainly be one that I would suggest. Alternatively, if you're a seasoned veteran and you're really into your cigars and you have been for many years and you're kind of fed up with all these Maduros that are extra strong because that's what the market thinks that you want, perhaps try it as well. You'd be surprised how mild it is. However, it does reward very slow smoking. Be sure to pace yourself to really enjoy those subtle nuances. I'm CP, and that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, don't forget to subscribe. Otherwise, head to bespokeunit.com, check out all of our resources. We don't just cover cigars, but a whole plethora of men's lifestyle considerations and topics. Otherwise, have a look around the channel, and I'm sure you'll find something that you'll enjoy. Until next time, take care.